This is how the storyline in the novel goes. One day, the world faced a disaster, towers and dungeons appeared everywhere, birthing monsters. The monsters then attacked humans, and made the world in a catastrophe, especially in the Korean peninsula, became a notorious area because in that place dungeons and towers appeared continuously, and there the attack of the monsters was more fierce than other countries. The scene there was really like hell. The civilians were very desperate when faced with the monsters who were very tough and fierce, but in that darkness, a bright light appeared. When seeing it, ordinary people seemed to see a hope in the midst of the desperate situation. In the novel, the light was called a hero. Korea fought with the monsters with the help of the power of the heroes, and they were slowly able to take over the existing towers and dungeons. Good news kept coming that made the citizens there able to take a breath of relief. By using the industry created in this disaster as a driving force, they managed to recover from the crisis. Day after day passed. Korea became a leading country that rivaled America. And Korea became a country where heroes from all over the world gathered, but the emergence of dungeons and monsters continued to increase. Realizing that, Korea then established a heroic institution using the most advanced magic engineering. The institution was called Cube. Cube is where hero cadets from all over the world who have gone through many unexpected things gather. Somewhere in the middle of a lush forest, a young man was seen practicing with his sword. That place is where the heroes who will save this world and their rivals are. That was the explanation of the storyline. As for how he knew all this, it was because the one who created this world was not a god, but him, the author. But there was one problem. In a large auditorium, a name was then called. It was the number one among the first-year cadets, Kim Suho. He could only be stunned when he saw that, somehow, the world he wrote in his novel, was now in front of his eyes. He witnessed all this in the middle of a crowd of students, Cube, cadets, and Kim Suho. This was all similar to the world he created in his novel. Realizing that, he then wondered, what exactly happened? He then heard the students around him talking about Kim Suho. They sounded unsure about him. Was he really that good? They felt he was just lucky because of the talent he had. They also wondered who was ranked second. Some of them also hoped that this would end soon. He felt like he was isolated in the crowd. He could hear their voices from a distance, and in a room quite far away, there were several people who were watching the students. There were sounds of praise because the students who were accepted this year were all great, and among the people who were watching, a woman was seen. The woman said, but among them, he was very extraordinary for someone who was 17 years old. Hearing that, he also knew that the person the woman was talking about was Kim Suho. Kim Suho was the protagonist of this world, the person who lead this chaotic world, which was dominated by heroes and monsters. He had the nature of a hero who was honest and upheld goodness and justice. And he had a special secret that he hid from everyone, and the person who would become his rival. After calling out Kim Suho, the host then called out the second in rank among the cadets, Shin Jong-hak. He is the fourth generation of the big company, Jinsung Company. He has the potential to rival the protagonist, but he is the future villain and he strongly believes in the doctrine of elitism. Maybe they are cadets for now, but later in the story, Jong-hak becomes the villain because of his inferiority towards Suho, and they fight each other like light and darkness. For two main characters to stand side by side like that, he must really be in the world in his novel. He then asks something important, who am I? If he is the character he wrote in his novel, he should at least have a name. Seeing him who had been silent all this time, his friend who was beside him then asked, why was he daydreaming like that? Did he sleep late? His friend called him by the name Chun-dong. He was then confused when he heard him suddenly ask him that. He then confusedly asked, was he talking to him? Hearing that, his friend replied, of course he was talking to him. He didn't see any other Kim Chun-dong around here. When he heard that name, he then wondered, is there really a character with that name? He didn't remember writing a character like that. Maybe he would remember it after he saw his face. But he was still confused, who is Kim Chun-dong? And when a hologram screen pointed at him, he was then finally able to see the face of himself in this world. He could only be dumbfounded when he saw it, because his face was just a big question mark. He really couldn't understand it, and that's when he realized. He became a character that he never wrote. He had no scenes where he appeared, his name was outdated, and he had almost no presence. He also realized the fact that made him helpless. No one cared even though he had no face. He was just an ordinary person other than the fact that he was a cube cadet, a character that had no contact with any of the main characters. basically, he was a side character, that's right, somehow. He was now an extra character in a novel, no, more precisely, he was just a speck of dust in this novel. One day, a message appeared, he who saw it was then confused. And when he opened the message, he was then even more confused when the author of the message proposed a remake of the novel he wrote, The Returnee Hero. The web novel he wrote, The Returnee Hero, was a novel that had been stopped serializing because he ran out of ideas, so he was confused when he read that they wanted to remake something that had stopped releasing. They were really unexpected. But he suddenly fell silent for a moment, because of the guilt of the stopped release, and he didn't know that the reply he sent, which he thought was just a request from fans, turned out to be the main cause of everything that happened. He went to the toilet to wash his face, but his face hadn't changed at all and was still a question mark. Now that he had seen his face like this for 2 weeks, he got used to it. It had been 2 weeks since he started seeing this unknown question mark. It seemed, this really wasn't a dream. This place was the world in the novel he made, and Kim Chun-dong, who he was possessed by, seemed to be one of the many side characters in this novel. He had tried various ways for the past 2 weeks, but he couldn't find out why he was brought here, who brought him to this place and why. He also felt, maybe he had to stay in this world for a very long time. If so, this world would continue even if the novel part stopped, meaning, maybe about 10 years. He became very depressed when he thought about it. He could hardly imagine having to live for 10 whole years trapped in a novel like this, laughing with children who were still in their teens. He also had a life, so he didn't want to just be stuck in a discontinued novel, but what the hell, he couldn't do anything to change this. He then tried to be optimistic, and tried to think of a way to return. For now, he couldn't think of any other way to get out, other than reaching the main story. If only he made it to the middle of the story, then, after that only the release part was discontinued. There was no other way but to try and live it. In the world of novels, The Returnee Hero, in order to achieve his goal, he had to go to school. In a very majestic city with tall buildings standing there and a fresh view of the sea. It is Cube. Cube is an artificial island located in the northeast, where about 50,000 people, including hero candidates, live, a city that gathers people who have magic and manufacturing abilities from all over the world. The existence of Cube is one of the reasons Korea is called a strong country, and the core of this city is the same as the main story of the novel, the Hero Training Academy, Cube. It is the place where he will study for the next few years. Although among the hero candidates who have special abilities, talents, but only a small percentage of the elite can become Cube cadets, the current original owner of his body, Kim Chun-dong, is also a Cube cadet. He does not know what abilities he has, but he feels he can definitely come to the Cube because he has an extraordinary talent. Whatever it is, he hopes it is a talent that he can use, in order to survive in this dangerous school. Shortly after that, he then arrived in front of a large entrance door with the word truth in front of it. Not stopping for too long, he then opened the door and went inside. A classroom-like room filled with teenagers of the same age as him, was then presented in front of him. The room was Truth Class, the center of the episode Cube, the antagonists and villains, allies and rivals, as well as the place where the protagonist is in this novel. Each character will soon create cliques, and because of that, they will face countless complications. 1 year with them, and worst of all, with no face. Honestly, he didn't know what he should do. After finishing his class, he then immediately returned to the dormitory. It was already late afternoon. He didn't even know how the day passed. He also lamented, how could he study every day when he used to be a high school student? But when he headed to his room, he was then surprised when he saw a package in front of his room door. He took the package and entered his room. He was confused why there was suddenly a package. He didn't hear any notification from the Cube. He wondered if this was Kim Chun-dong's personal belongings, and when he unsealed the package, he was then surprised, because the package turned out to contain the notebook he used in his previous world. He was confused why it was here, and when he tried to turn it on, a notification suddenly appeared from the notebook, starting the synchronization, and a bright light suddenly appeared. He was surprised by the sudden change, but the notebook did not stop. Kim Chun-dong started the synchronization on Kim Hajin. After a while, the settings were downloaded, and stats such as variable stats and invariable stats then appeared in front of him. There were also several other settings that contained him. Seeing that, Kim Hajin then realized, this was the setup book he wrote. He also wondered, who sent this to him, but he then froze. After the synchronization was completed, the notebook suddenly died for a while, and a notification then appeared. Unique authority, setting intervention, was obtained, and something in him then changed. He felt like he was reborn. Kim Chundong was now officially Kim Hajin. All stats were reset due to synchronization. The notification indicated that the synchronization was complete. He then immediately looked at the screen of his notebook to confirm the situation. He was then surprised because his face was now no longer a question mark, but his original face when he was a teenager, looking at the system window that popped up beside him. He then confusedly asked, "What happened? And what was all this?" After looking at the system window that told him that the synchronization had been completed, he then had a kind of conjecture. Could this be a kind of enlightenment, an awakening phenomenon that occurs when a person transcends his limits in this world? It is called enlightenment. By following the enlightenment process, you are able to see your talents, skills, abilities and others as your values, and you can become powerful with a much more efficient method than before. To make it simple, you can look at your window status. The case is like what Hajin is experiencing right now. Hajin then checked his window status. He has the observation and browsing talents. The observation talent makes him able to observe those who appear in his line of sight, while the browsing talent makes him able to explore the notebook settings section at any time without using the media. He can also see his mastery, constitution, and stats on the status window. Seeing that, he then checked them one by one. The parts that really caught his attention were synchronization and initialization. He didn't know what they were, but he guessed they might be the reason behind why his face stopped being a question mark symbol and returned to normal. His stats dropped drastically from Kim Chuandong's stats, but in return, he gained points, and the next thing to note was unique authority, intervention settings. He can use SP to write or edit any non-living target. He can use SP to write or edit stats, talents, mastery, and constitution, limited to Kim Hajin's target. The greater Kim Hajin's involvement in this world, the more SP he can get, can convert 1 point to 1,000 SP. He can also write talents by exchanging 10,000 SP. Seeing that, Hajin then confusedly wondered, what kind of thing is this? He didn't remember writing abilities like this. Also, the greater Kim Hajin's involvement in this world. Reading that, he then guessed. Could it be that he had to increase his involvement in this novel? Could it be that the reason why he was given this notebook and strange abilities was so that he could interfere with the main story of this world? He really couldn't accept this nonsense. Not waiting for his shock to be over, a notification then appeared, but it was just a locked info. It would open when the main story ended. Seeing that, Hajin then became annoyed, knowing that it was the same as saying, if he wanted to find clues about returning to his home world, he couldn't keep quiet and had to interfere. He then sat down and opened his notebook. He tried to think not to be too optimistic. There was no guarantee he would be sent back to his home world, even if he did nothing and waited until the part where he stopped publishing. Even if the information that would open up was not the clues he wanted, he might find clues about escaping this world if he got involved with the main character, and to be able to do so, he had to become strong enough to survive the main story. Based on that thought, he then invested points in his stats. There was no concept of leveling up in his novels, basically. Since you couldn't level up your stats as you wished, the only method to do so, points, was a very valuable resource, and if he wanted to maximize the points he had to invest in luck. Luck wasn't limited to just the chance of finding unknown rewards in dungeons, getting money, bonus stats, interpersonal relationships, and so on. It was a deceptive status that applied in every aspect of life, of course. Invariable stats like luck were made so that it couldn't be increased with points, but he got some kind of plan that could realize that is by converting all his points to SP, and investing 9,000 SP into luck. Shortly after that, he then got some kind of notification from the system. A mysterious luck took effect, changing luck to 9.1. He was quite surprised that luck could even affect this. The strength stat of the protagonist Kim Suho was 9.0, so this was a spectacular result. He then planned to invest the remaining SP into perseverance. After all, he had to endure the extreme training of Cube, and when he raised his perseverance stat, enormous luck takes effect. Perseverance increased from 6.6 to 7.207. Seeing that, Hajin lamented, luck is indeed king, and just as he was happy because his stats increased significantly, a system notification then appeared. An error that could greatly affect the plot had been discovered. Hajin was then shocked to see that, from now on, invariable stats could not be modified with SP, he could only feel gloomy when he saw that. What an unfair move, he did not expect. It turned out that there was a limit to the trick, he just thought it would go well, still, he managed to salvage luck and perseverance. Come to think of it, he had another 10,000 SP from the beginner's consideration. Thinking about that, Hajin then thought, maybe he should think about it carefully first before using it. The next day, Hajin attended class as usual. A teacher praised them after the morning training that went well. Now, he would introduce himself. His name was Kim Suhyuk. He would be the instructor in charge of them for the coming year. They were then surprised when they heard that. They knew that their teacher was a hero with 3,850 ranking points. He was the 9,737th ranked hero in the world. He was very great when he could enter the rank of 9,000 among 2 million people. From the classification of the association, it was a medium-high rank, level 5. After introducing himself, Kim Suhyuk said, "Let's discuss the current problem. Cube is not a comfortable place like they want. They will be evaluated solely based on grades, and if they perform poorly, they will repeat. Statistically speaking, less than half of the cadets graduate from the Cube without repeating. Since this is a facility to educate heroes, they will be judged with precise and strict standards." After saying all that, he then told them to stand up and follow him. Hearing that, Hajin knew, this was the first part of the schedule, the main weapon selection. As they followed Kim Suhyuk, they were then taken somewhere. After Kim Suhyuk opened the door of the room they were going to, they were then amazed by the scene. Inside, a futuristic room with lots of weapons of various types on display. Then presented before their eyes, they were amazed when they saw so many weapons in there. Seeing that, Kim Suhyuk said that he never gave them time to be amazed, so he told them to hurry up and pick the weapon of their choice. Hearing that, they immediately rushed to choose. Kim Suhyuk warned, when they chose the main weapon, they would not be able to replace it for about 6 months, so he told them to choose wisely. At the time of weapon selection, Kim Suho unhesitatingly picked a sword as his weapon. There was also a beautiful tomboy-looking woman who chose a crossbow. There was also a western-looking woman who chose a rapier as her weapon, and a black-haired woman with a cold face who chose a whip as her weapon. They were the main characters. They had chosen their main weapons without any problems, so now it was time to choose hymns. Hajin looked hesitant. He had to be careful. His stats were too low to handle the weapons used by the cadets. Even if he raised his stats from now on to try and use this weapon, the results would be meager compared to the effort required, so there were some conditions attached to his chosen weapon. A weapon he had used in the real world, a weapon that took the least amount of time for him to adapt to, and as he looked at it, he then finally found a suitable weapon. The students who were watching looked surprised when they saw him chosen weapon. They even asked if he was joking. Kim Suhyuk also noticed the commotion, but he was then also surprised when he saw Hajin's weapon of choice. He then asked him, what was the weapon he had chosen? The weapon that shocked them turned out to be a gun. Hajin suddenly became the center of attention because of that. Kim Suhyuk then called him and said, he remembered he used a sword in the military academy. Hearing that, Hajin just said, he decided to change it. Kim Suhyuk asked, after coming to Cube. Hajin answered yes. Hearing that, Kim Suhyuk then looked at him sharply, but he did not force him to change his weapon, because all decisions in the Cube were made by the cadets. No matter the decision was wrong or right, the cadets would be responsible. He told them to never forget that. Hajin's expression did not change at all when he heard that. He then heard the surrounding students whispering about him. They asked if he was crazy. Why did he come to Cube if in the end he chose a gun? They really didn't understand. Some even planned to beat him during the battle and training later. Some felt that he was just looking for attention. Hajin could only scratch his head. When he heard that, he felt that the gun was still a good weapon in this world. But for ordinary citizens who could not use magic power, the most widely used type of bullet is the magic bullet. Because it is coated with mana, it contains more destructive power than ordinary bullets. Despite such advantages, the reason why the gun is not desirable here is that there is a clear limitation. Although the gun bullet can reach the speed of sound, but it is nothing compared to the heroes. That is the first reason. No matter how powerful the user is, the destructive power of the gun is limited, and the other reason is, the gun has a short history in this world. In this world, myths and legends come to life. Artifacts of myths and legends live as weaponry in the real world. The more majestic the origin, the deeper the history related to the artifact, the higher the rank. Because of this, the cadets in the cube usually choose ancient weapons instead of modern weapons. They do not believe in magic bullets. Of course, this had nothing to do with him. After all, he was not the protagonist of Manhwa. He had never used a sword, so how could he compete with other cadets? He felt that choosing a gun might not be a bad choice. He could use it quickly. If he used it, it would make him stand out, and it would allow him to get SP, since he had chosen his weapon. Now it was time to get the talent. Talent. It is an ability that can be called specialization. Most people only receive one talent, but there are some exception characters, have passive talents, and active talents. The owner of the Sword Saint character, Kim Suho, he was now in the training room. He looked surprised when he saw someone who was also there. That person was Chai Nayun. Suho asked, "Did she also practice here?" Hearing his silly question, Nayun then asked him back, where else should she practice? She didn't expect someone like him to be in the top rank. Suho seemed to realize his silly question. He also said, there aren't many people after class ends, so he came here. He remembered something after seeing her. Now there is another sharpshooter in their class. Hearing that, Nayun was confused for a moment, but she then realized the person he meant. The person he was referring to was of course Hajin. Suho confirmed that, but he was then confused when he saw Nayun wearing a strange expression. Nayun said that she couldn't accept it. He couldn't call him a sharpshooter with a shooting range of less than a kilometer. He might as well give up on being a hero, since he wouldn't have an expulsion record if he retired early, so he was just trying to hold on a little longer. Hearing her dismissive tone, Suho said she shouldn't say that lightly. Nayun could only be confused to hear him suddenly say that, and when he saw Suho's innocent smile, he then scolded him and told him not to lecture her. She also told him to just get out of here if he didn't want to practice. Suho could only apologize. The conversation between the two of them was overheard by Hajin, but he didn't seem to know who was talking about it, but he felt that he could also get SP from it. After all, the protagonist Kim Suho could become the greatest hero with just this talent. That was the importance of talents, because he had already received 10,000 SP when he wrote his first talent. He could not waste this opportunity. He then asked if he should write something simple first. He decided to write the talent Master Sharpshooter, which made him proficient in using ranged weapons. He spent a total of 10,000 SP to write the talent. Shortly after that, an explanation of the Master Sharpshooter talent then appeared in front of him. The talent has 3 effects, including bullet time. Every 4 hours, a total of 3 seconds will be given as bullet time. Master Sharpshooter's training. He becomes proficient in all types of long-range weapons, and 1,000-mile eye. He can see from a long distance and can predict the target's movement path. Seeing that, Hajin thought this would be useful for him, with the effect of being proficient in all kinds of long-range weapons. This not only makes him able to use gun, but also can use weapons such as bows later. Besides, this is an evolving talent, although now it is still a little pitiful. But if it can develop, this is an advantage. If you think about the long-term benefits, this is much better. So without hesitation, he then chose this talent. Hajin then stretched his body comfortably. He felt that now he already had a little preparation. He just needed to persevere with the talent, until the story ended. The next day, the cube still looked busy as usual. Hajin at this time was attending class. While showing the hologram of the Earth, the teacher explained, trivial questions like this are usually not included, but they still have to understand the examples of tower and dungeon attacks. While listening to the explanation of the teacher, Hajin thought. He did not expect that it only takes a few lines of description to make a textbook. If other students know it, they will cry with envy, but because he has the talent of observation and browsing, he can easily pass this class. Just like the name, observation and browsing, he can observe all the characters that come into his line of sight, even their watches, and whenever he wants. He can browse the timeline settings of the notebook on his retina without any intermediaries. After explaining, the teacher then told them to remember what they had learned today. She also asked, they must know the written test is approaching, right? Nayun tried to listen to the lesson carefully, but she couldn't. She resentfully asked, why should she learn this kind of thing? Shouldn't she just have to show her skills in the practical training? But her prayers seemed to be answered, because shortly after that, someone then entered their class, and told them to go to the field in 20 minutes. Nayun was then very happy to hear that. Some other students also looked quite enthusiastic, because this meant that there would be practical exercises. But Hajin did not look as enthusiastic as them. He just thought, "It's finally here." When they had gathered in the field, the teacher said he hoped they all knew about today's lesson. Without further delay, he would announce the team formation. Each team consisted of 4 members. The members consist of 2 warriors, 1 sharpshooter, and 1 support. This team will last until the midterm exam, unless special circumstances arise. Each team will be divided fairly. High and low-ranking cadets will be placed in the same team. He told them to remember his words just now so that no one would be confused later, and also invited them to check their teams, and when Hajin saw which team he was placed in, he was then surprised, because he did not expect to be on the same team with that person.